Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. Suggests we may be going into a period of legal ambiguity here. I don't have the text of the law in front of me, but on this point about a 90-day extension, here is from the Supreme Court opinion. The act permits the president to grant a one-time extension of no more than 90 days. My italics there on the phrase one-time extension, but apparently the law is pretty clear about that. On the other hand, if Trump tries to do a second one-time extension, it's not very clear to me who might have standing to bring a lawsuit about that, insisting that the Trump administration go forward with these penalties, requiring the app to be banned from app stores. I mean, I suppose, Kim, he could do what the Biden administration apparently has done for this one-day period and just insist that, no, we are not going to enforce this. We are not going to go collect these penalties on you. But on the other hand, if an app store is facing some kind of liability and has assurances from one administration that that liability is not going to be collected upon, there's no guarantee that a subsequent administration after a next presidential election wouldn't try to go back and take a different view of that. And by the way, Kim, while we're talking about this interaction between the Trump administration and these big tech companies, there are also other policies that they want potentially out of the White House. If we're talking about a world here next week where President Trump is imposing some kind of universal tariffs for a company like Apple that is importing handsets that are made abroad, manufactured abroad, even if a lot of the value of the design and so forth is U.S. based, that's a big deal. And there may be some conversations about that between these tech companies and the Trump administration.
Well, your point about legal ambiguity is really important because it gets even more complicated than that. The law does provide the president, and that would be today, right now, President Biden, at the moment, until Trump takes over, the authority to impose a one-time extension of up to 90 days, as you said. But triggering that extension, and this is written into the law, is that the president must prove to Congress that there is a viable deal in the offer, that their parties are working to make a purchase happen, and that moreover, they have made real progress, including binding legal agreements. Now, obviously, given that ByteDance has been absolutely adamant that the company is not for sale, we wouldn't seem to have any evidence of that anywhere. There's a lot of legal ambiguity about Biden simply not enforcing this. This is the law of the land, and the Supreme Court just said that that law stood. And even if he weren't to enforce it, somebody needs to deal at some point with this question about a trigger. I guess you can just ignore the law, but that is a terrible example to be setting. I'm not quite sure if there are outside players that would have some sort of legal recourse in this case either. That seems to make it even more complicated. But I think that unfortunately, Joe Biden's example right now of simply saying, well, I know the law said this, so I'm just going to leave it to the next guy. And the next guy essentially saying, I want to solve this in a way that's, outside what the law dictates. This isn't a good look for either of our presidents and chiefs and heads of government.
And on that point, Alicia, I'm starting to wonder whether it is almost a test of American seriousness, because the U.S. interest in not having this app with millions of U.S. users whose data is being hoovered up and potentially accessible to the Chinese Communist Party seems pretty clear. And my recollection is that there was more than one attempt to pass this TikTok ban into law, but it was not a close vote. It was not a partisan vote. There was one vote on it in the House in April of 2024. Bipartisan tally, 360 in favor and 58 against. And so it seems a clear sense of Congress as of last year that forcing a divestment of this app operating in the United States was clearly in the U.S. national interest. But now that we are only a day or so away from the actual event, the actual ban of this from app stores taking place, it looks like the politicians are kind of running for cover, many of them, knowing that there are going to be many users of TikTok, people who love to post things on it, who love to flip through the videos Filipinos on it who might be angry about this. And so it looks to me, Alicia, like Beijing and China are thinking that this is a game of chicken they are playing with the U.S. democratic system that they are ultimately going to win. Is it really feasible that the U.S., Washington, is going to blink here, faced with this choice of trying to find some sort of way to save this app or letting the law as passed by Congress actually take effect?
Well, I think you're right about the test of U.S. seriousness. And I'd also point out that Chuck Schumer has also now come around and said, well, maybe Trump's right about this. Let's try to strike a deal. He was never really in favor of the ban, and he actually had to be pushed by a lot of the Democratic senators like Mark Warner and his party to bring up a vote, because Democrats, ironically, they were worried that this would hurt their ability to connect to young people in an election year. So Donald Trump says, well, then the app helped him win the election. But I think that a lot of Democrats are actually benefit from the app, and we really don't know. I think TikTok has probably whispered in Donald Trump's ear that it helped him. But as I said, the platform can be used for nefarious purposes and political purposes that benefit either party. To your point about China playing chicken, what I worry is that if this doesn't get enforced, China will see this and will, also try to test the Trump administration other ways, more cyber intrusions, maybe depredations in the South China Sea, and will also signal to other countries like Russia that the U.S. really isn't all that serious about national security. And we saw that a little bit with the Biden administration with the sanctions on Iran and Russia that just were never actually enforced. And so if you don't enforce a law, you just encourage the adversaries to push further. So in a way, this is actually a test of U.S. deterrence, I would say.
Thank you, Alicia and Kim. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back next week with another edition of Potomac Watch.